Rocket took off from Brazil's Alcantara launch center but fell and crashed into the ground almost immediately.
Brazil's first commercial space launch was supposed to make history. Thousands of people were watching live. However, just 2 minutes after liftoff, everything went wrong. The South Korean company was trying to reach orbit. 5 satellites were on board. The rocket was climbing perfectly into the sky. Then the live stream flashed 2 words. Anomaly detected. The feed went black, and nobody watching knew what had just happened. Because this launch site carries a dark secret. 22 years ago, at the same spot, 21 people were killed in a rocket explosion. And now something had just gone terribly wrong at the exact same place. So what could possibly go wrong in just 30 seconds? It was December 22nd, 2025. The time was 10:13 at night, Brazil time. The HANBIT-Nano rocket stood on the launch pad at the Alcantara Space Center. This was Brazil's first commercial space launch ever. The company behind it was INNOSPACE. It was a South Korean startup, about 260 employees. They had built everything themselves. Their own engines, their own technology, their own rocket. This was their big moment, their first orbital launch that would prove their technology worked. And the live stream started with thousands watching online as the countdown reached 0. The rocket climbed. Everything looked perfect, going straight up just like it was supposed to be. There were 5 satellites on board, with 8 payloads total from Brazil, South Korea, and India, all heading to orbit 300 kilometers up. 10 seconds passed, then 20 seconds, and everything was normal. However, at 30 seconds, something changed. The rocket started moving differently. It wasn't going straight anymore, and it was drifting off course. On the live stream, those 2 words appeared: Anomaly detected. Then the feed cut, black screen, nothing. In 30 seconds, Brazil's first commercial space launch went from perfect to total communications blackout. But what was actually happening while everyone stared at blank screens? While viewers at home saw nothing, Mission Control was watching something terrifying unfold. The rocket was losing control and drifting off its planned flight path, and if it kept going, it could crash anywhere, including overpopulated areas or the ocean where ships might be. Ground control had only seconds to make a decision. International safety rules are clear about what to do when a rocket goes off course, and they made the call. They activated the flight termination system. The rocket stopped climbing. It started falling back toward Earth. Ground control had just made the rocket fall from the sky. So what happened when a rocket falls from that height? The rocket fell inside the designated safety zone, away from populated areas. And when it hit the ground, everything changed. The impact was massive. The rocket was destroyed, the 5 satellites were destroyed, and all 8 payloads were gone in an instant, which meant months of work and millions of dollars vanished. The next day, the company's stock crashed with a 29% drop, which was the biggest fall in the company's history. However, something else was happening that nobody was talking about yet. People who knew the history of this place were starting to remember something that happened at this exact location 22 years ago. Brazil's first commercial launch had just ended in a fireball on the ground. But why would anyone choose this location in the first place? The Alcantara Space Center sits in northeastern Brazil, just 2.3 degrees south of the equator. And that location is perfect for launching rockets because it's one of the best spots in the world. The Earth spins fastest at the equator, which means rockets launched from there get a free speed boost from the planet's rotation. That advantage means rockets need 13% less fuel compared to places like Cape Canaveral. They can carry heavier satellites, and they can launch more frequently. Every space company wants equatorial launch sites because there aren't many, and Alcantara is one of the best. That's why INNOSPACE chose Brazil, and they had even done a successful test launch in 2023 that verified their engine design. They scheduled the commercial launch for November 22nd, but delays pushed it to December 15th, then December 17th, then December 22nd because of technical issues and bad weather. When December 22nd arrived, everything checked out and the live stream went live. However, 30 seconds later, it was over. INNOSPACE had chosen the perfect location on Earth for their launch, and it still ended in complete disaster. Now here's what nobody's talking about. This exact launch site has seen this before. August 22nd, 2003, 22 years ago, Brazil was preparing to launch its own rocket, the VLS-1 VO3. This was Brazil's third try to put a satellite in space using their own rocket. The rocket sat on the launch pad, final tests underway. Everything looked good, launch set for 3 days later. However, something happened that nobody expected. One of the rocket's solid boosters suddenly ignited while it was still on the pad, and it just fired while people were standing right next to it working. The fire spread to the other boosters in seconds. The entire rocket exploded right there on the launch pad while people were still around it. But how many people were actually there when it happened? Survivors heard one booster start running, then loud bangs, then saw flames at 3,000 degrees Celsius. The explosion killed 21 people in seconds. They were civilian technicians and senior engineers who had worked on Brazil's space program for years. And they were gone, along with the launch tower and satellite. Investigators found the cause was static electricity creating a spark in the detonator, and that tiny spark killed 21 people. The tower took $10 million and 9 years to build. Brazil's rocket program was cancelled in 2016, which meant the country gave up building their own rockets because the disaster killed Brazil's dream of reaching space independently. For 22 years, that tragedy hung over Alcantara. 21 people died in a rocket explosion at this launch site, and now, 22 years later, another rocket exploded in the same place. But this disaster didn't just destroy a rocket, it destroyed something much bigger. INNOSPACE's stock crashed 29% the day after the disaster, which wiped out massive amounts of investor money in a single trading session. The company had spent years developing this technology and millions of dollars building the HANBIT-Nano rocket, and it was all gone in 30 seconds. However, the financial damage goes far beyond just INNOSPACE, because 5 satellites from multiple countries were destroyed, which means Brazilian companies, South Korean companies, and Indian companies all lost their payloads and investments. Brazil has invested over $600 million into Alcantara Space Center over the decades, building infrastructure, launch facilities, and establishing international partnerships to compete in the global space industry. That entire investment is now at risk because international companies are reconsidering whether they want to launch from Alcantara after watching this disaster unfold live. The 2003 disaster cost Brazil $10 million just to rebuild the launch tower and took 9 years to complete. But the real cost was losing their entire domestic rocket program, which was cancelled in 2016. Now, in 2025, Brazil faces another crisis, where their first commercial launch failed spectacularly on camera in front of the whole world. INNOSPACE had contracts lined up, including a $5.8 million deal with a German company for launches between 2026 and 2029. But those contracts are now in question. South Korea's reputation in the space industry took a hit because INNOSPACE was supposed to be their success story, showing that South Korean private companies could compete globally in space technology. The satellite customers lost not just their hardware, but years of development work and the scientific missions or commercial services those satellites were supposed to provide. One 30-second failure just cost both countries hundreds of millions in losses and decades of trust in the commercial space industry. So what does this mean for Brazil's space future? 2 rocket disasters at Alcantara Space Center, with 21 killed in 2003, and the first commercial launch ending in flames in 2025. Both on the same pad, 22 years apart. INNOSPACE says they'll try again, because SpaceX failed 3 times before succeeding. Rocket Lab lost rockets, and Chinese companies lost multiple rockets in 2025, which shows first launches almost always fail. However, the real question is whether they'll launch from Alcantara again. Companies want this location because 13% fuel savings and heavier payloads are too good to ignore. But now they know the history with 21 dead and 2 disasters. The 2003 explosion destroyed Brazil's rocket program and set them back a generation. Will this disaster destroy commercial launches the same way? Brazil needs Alcantara to succeed to prove the site is safe and they can handle commercial operations. However, the world just watched Brazil's first commercial launch fail live on camera. INNOSPACE lost their rocket and satellites. Brazil lost something bigger, and that was trust. Early reports show flames were visible immediately after liftoff, which means something was already wrong. Possible causes include engine failure, hybrid engine problems, cooling unit issues, launch debris, or structural failure. Ground control says the rocket veered at 30 seconds, and that's when they terminated it. No casualties because safety systems worked, but the mission was a complete failure. Brazil's first commercial space launch was supposed to prove Alcantara could compete with the world's best launch sites. Instead, 30 seconds after liftoff, an anomaly was detected and it crashed in flames. 5 satellites destroyed. No one hurt, but the mission failed. People watched this video to understand what went wrong, to see if Brazil's space program is cursed, and to know if Alcantara is safe. INNOSPACE will analyze the data, fix the problems, and try again, because that's how space works. However, the question remains whether they'll launch from Brazil again, or if Alcantara's curse is too much to overcome. What happens next time